Declare this podcast will be distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes.
Welcome back to the deep dive. I hope you're sitting comfortably, or, well, at least that you're ready to have your perception of reality tilted just a few degrees to the left.
Chuckles.
Just a few.
Because today, we aren't just reading a book. We are stepping into a time machine.
We really are. We're going back to the summer of 1965.
Specifically, June 21st, 1965. It is hot. It is sticky. It is, upstate New York. And we are cracking open the early sessions. Book 4 of the Seth Material to look at a single fascinating entry, session 163.
And usually when people think of channeled material or metaphysics, they picture these really quiet rooms, meditation, maybe some incense burning.
Very zen.
Very zen, very peaceful.
Very peace and love, very quiet.
But this one starts in the aftermath of a literal sonic explosion. It starts with jazz.
A jazz mass, to be specific, which honestly sounds like the coolest thing to ever happen in a Presbyterian church in the mid-'60s.
I think it might be.
But look, we have a mission today. We aren't just here for the music history, although the image of a jazz band in a church in Horseheads, New York, it's just fantastic.
It's great visual.
We are here to decode a very specific mechanism that Seth lays out in this session. It's about how we create our reality, but it flips the script on a word we use constantly without even thinking about it: suggestion.
Oh, it completely dismantles the way we think about influence. I mean, we tend to think of suggestion as this external thing, like a hypnotist snapping their fingers or a commercial telling you to buy soap.
Something that happens to you.
Exactly. But Seth argues that's not how reality works, not at all. He moves us from suggestion to inner impetus.
And this is where it gets heavy. I'm just warning you now. By the end of this hour, we're going to look at your bad habits and maybe even your illnesses in a way that might actually make you uncomfortable at first. Because Seth argues that sometimes getting sick is actually a constructive move by your psyche.
It's the illness paradox. And it's one of the most provocative ideas in the early material, for sure. It just challenges that simple binary of sick is bad, healthy is good.
So buckle up. We've got loud jazz, we've got torrential rainstorms, and we've got a philosophy that says you are the architect of your own disasters. Maybe for a good reason. Let's start with the vibe check. Take us to Elmira.
Okay, so let's set the scene. It's June 1965. Rob and Jane are living in Elmira, New York. And if you've ever spent a summer in that part of the state, you know the humidity is. It's its own entity. It's just oppressive.
It's that air that you wear like a wet coat. You just walk outside and you stick to everything.
Exactly that. And so the session itself takes place on a Monday night, June 21st. But to really understand the mindset they were in, we have to look at what happened the night before, on Sunday, June 20th.
This is the jazz mess.
The jazz mess. Rob and Jane, along with their friends the Gallaghers, went to a presentation by a guy named Joe Masters at the Presbyterian Church in Horseheads, New York.
Horseheads. I will never get over that name. It sounds like a place where a horror movie starts, but apparently it's just a nice town near Elmira.
It is, but on this particular Sunday, it was not quiet. Rob describes the volume in his notes as literally deafening.
And they weren't like hiding in the back row, politely clapping.
No. Rob notes they were in the second row. So you have a large choir, you have a full jazz band, trumpets, saxophones, percussion, and they are getting hit with the full force of this performance right in the face.
Now, for most people, that's just a loud concert, you know.
Yeah.
But Rob is Rob. He's a scribe, but he's also this constant experimenter. He's not just hearing the music. He's analyzing the physics of the sensation.
And this is such a crucial detail because it sets up the whole theme of invisible waves that Seth talks about later. Rob writes that he became aware of solid but invisible waves beating against his ears externally.
I love the analogy he uses here. He says it felt like cupped hands clapping against my ears.
Yes, that is such a specific feeling.
Think about that sensation. It's not just sound, it's pressure, it's percussive, it's physical. It's like the air itself is becoming a solid object because of the vibration.
And yet, he says it wasn't painful. He describes a rich, thrilling sensation that suffused his head and then spread through his body. But, and this is the interesting part, it wasn't an even distribution. It was hitting different parts of him differently.
Okay, and here's the part that just made me laugh out loud when I was reading the notes. It's so characteristic of Rob. He's sitting there in the middle of this wall of sound, and he decides, you know what? This is a laboratory condition.
He never turns it off. He is always the researcher, always.
He wants to test if he can move this sensation around. He wants to see if he can focus this reception of energy. So what does he do? He tries to hear the sound with his left knee.
It sounds ridiculous when you just say it out loud like that.
I mean, can you imagine you're sitting in church, the jazz band is just wailing, everyone is vibing, and you are intensely staring at your kneecap thinking, come on, knee, listen to the saxophone. You can do it.
Well, it sounds absurd on the surface, I grant you that. But if you know the context of the previous sessions, especially session 154, it makes perfect sense.
Oh, okay.
Seth had been discussing the body's generalized ability to receive stimuli. The idea is that our five senses, our eyes, our ears, our nose, they're just specialized channels that we've developed over evolution. But the whole body is actually a receptor.
So the theory is that every cell basically has the capacity to hear or see, but we've just sort of delegated that job to the ears and eyes for efficiency.
Precisely. We have specialized for the sake of survival in the physical world, but that potential for generalized perception, it remains in the cellular memory. So Rob isn't just being crazy.
Right.
He's trying to verify a metaphysical hypothesis. He's trying to see if he can bypass the specialized organ, the ear, and receive that vibration directly through the bone or the flesh of his knee.
So does it work? Does his knee start tapping its foot?
He notes that he didn't succeed especially, which is, a very polite way of saying, not really.
Right.
But he says the attempt showed him the tangible and solid nature of the waves. And that's the key takeaway. We think of sound as just air, as nothing. To his inner senses, that energy had substance. It was real stuff.
And what about Jane? She wasn't trying to listen with her elbows or anything?
No. Jane's experience was much more emotional and state-based. She felt strong, thrilling sensations, which she equated to her good state, or what she called psi time. She even used the word ecstasy.
Psi time. We should probably define that for anyone who hasn't, memorized the glossary.
Right. Psi time was Jane's term for a state of psychological expansion. It's like a mild trance state where the ego relaxes and she feels connected to a larger energy source. It's often characterized by a feeling of lightness, joy, and really acute sensory perception.
Which makes perfect sense. I mean, music is a huge trigger for altered states. It just shuts down the chatter of the conscious mind, the grocery lists, the worries, the bills, unless you just ride the energy.
And riding the energy is exactly what this whole session turns out to be about, the flow of action. But before we get to the heavy philosophy, there's one more little domestic nugget from the notes that I just love. It's so relatable, and it really grounds this whole thing in reality.
You mean the chores?
The chores. This is the day before the jazz mass, Saturday, June 19th. Jane is just going about her housework. She's, scrubbing floors or doing dishes.
The high priestess of the universe, scrubbing the linoleum. It's a great image.
It really is. And she's thinking about Bill Gallagher. Now, Bill is the friend they went to the concert with, and apparently Bill had an ulcer.
Ouch. Ulcers are no fun.
No, and Jane is just idly thinking about an ulcer diet for Bill. She's thinking, oh, it wouldn't be practical for him to eat spicy foods, or he should really avoid coffee, just that sort of thing, just practical, mundane advice.
And Seth he just pops in.
Seth drops a one-liner right into her head. He says, our ideas and practicality are often hardly practical.
I love that. It's so Seth. It's sassy, but it's profound. I mean, we spend so much time worrying about the practical details, the diet, the schedule, the logistics, and we completely miss the big picture of what's actually going on energetically.
It is a gentle reminder that we often focus on the symptoms rather than the root causes. We try to fix the ulcer with milk and bland food without asking why the ulcer is there in the first place. Which actually is the perfect segue into the session itself.
Okay, let's go there. It's Monday night, June 21st, 9:00 p.m. The jazz mass is over. The ringing in Rob's ears has probably stopped. Now they are back in their living room in Elmira.
And the atmosphere is oppressive. Rob notes it is an extremely hot and humid evening. They have the windows open, so there's all this traffic noise drifting in from the street.
But Jane just zones in. She starts speaking, and Rob mentions she's sitting forward in her rocker, elbows on her knees, head down. And then, about halfway through the first segment, the sky just opens up.
A heavy rain begins to fall, a proper summer storm. Rob says it was noisy, thunder, rain hammering the roof. But Jane, channeling Seth, she doesn't even flinch. Her voice just cuts right through it all.
It sets such a mood. Just the two of them. The heat, the sudden storm, and this voice explaining the secrets of the universe. So Seth starts off by teasing them a little, but then he pivots to the main topic. Suggestion.
And he immediately goes on the attack against the word itself. He says, The term suggestion is a poor one. As it operates within your system and within the human personality, the word expectation is a much better term.
Okay, let's stop here and really unpack this. Expectation versus suggestion. Why does this word swap matter so much? Is it just semantics?
Oh, it is definitely not just semantics. Think about how we use the word suggestion. I suggest you take an umbrella. The advertisement suggests you buy this car. It implies something tentative, and crucially, it implies something external.
Right. It feels like the world is throwing things at me, and I'm just sort of catching them. The suggestion comes at me.
Exactly. It paints the human as this passive receiver. But expectation is internal, it's active. If I expect rain, I am orienting my entire reality toward rain. I am preparing for it. I am looking for it. Seth defines it as a projection into the physical universe of data that operates constantly.
Projection. That's the key word there.
Okay.
So it's not that we're receiving suggestions from the universe, it's that we are projecting expectations onto the universe.
Yes, and he goes deeper. He says this isn't just some psychological trick. It's about the nature of action itself.
Action is a big term in the Seth material. It's usually capitalized in the transcripts, isn't it?
It is. In Seth's cosmology, action is like the fundamental stuff of existence. Before there was matter, before there was time, there was action. It's the energy of consciousness in motion. And Seth says that this inner impetus, what we mistakenly call suggestion, is simply the direction in which action flows.
He uses this beautiful phrase, this impetus is a natural and spontaneous movement that springs from within action itself.
And that word spontaneity is so vital. We tend to think we need to force ourselves to do things. We think the universe runs on these rigid laws, gravity, cause, and effect. But Seth says these directions are not forced upon action by any laws. They're merely the resultant patterns with which energy expresses itself.
So if I can use an analogy here.
Yeah.
Imagine a river.
Okay.
The water flowing, that's action. The direction the water is moving.
Yeah.
Well, that's the inner impetus, or what we call suggestion. It's not that something is pushing the river. Flowing downhill is just what the river does.
That is a very, very good analogy. The river doesn't need a law to tell it to flow. It just flows. That is its nature. And the banks of the river are your expectations. They guide the flow.
But here's the problem. Seth says that the ego, our conscious eye, it often prefers not to perceive this natural flow. Why would the ego want to ignore the river it's swimming in?
Because the ego is obsessed with control, or at least the illusion of control. It wants to think it is directing the ship rather than just riding the current. It wants to believe it is separate from the environment so it can manipulate it. If it admits it's just part of the flow, it feels vulnerable.
So when we talk about negative suggestions, we aren't talking about someone saying mean things to us. We're talking about something disrupting that natural flow.
Correct. Seth defines negative suggestions as impeding actions. So going back to your river analogy, imagine throwing a bunch of boulders into the stream, or trying to dig a channel that goes sharply against the current.
Cross currents.
Yes, Seth says. They operate then in much the same manner as cross currents, setting up blockages and impeding main energies by dividing them in several diverse directions.
And this is where it gets risky for our mental health, right?
Yeah.
Because if you have energy trying to go in two different directions at once, you get turbulence.
You get entanglement. Seth warns that if action entangles itself, it threatens the integrity and identity of the personality. It's like a psychological short circuit. You literally tear yourself apart energetically.
Okay, so we have the main flow constructive action, and we have cross currents impeding action. This seems pretty straightforward so far. Good flow equals health, bad flow equals blockage. But then Seth drops a bomb.
He does. This is the aha moment of the entire session. It just completely complicates the picture.
The illness paradox. I read this part 3 times because it feels so counterintuitive. Seth basically argues that getting sick, which we all agree is bad, right?
Yeah.
Can actually be a constructive action.
It is a controversial idea, especially in our culture where health is the ultimate virtue and illness is seen as some kind of failure. But if you follow his logic, it makes perfect, chilling sense. He says, an illness may nevertheless be a constructive action at any given time in that it may prevent action within the personality from following more destructive actions.
So wait, let's make this concrete. Because abstract philosophy is fine, but I need to understand what this looks like on a Tuesday. Are you telling me that my flu might be my inner self's way of stopping me from doing something even worse?
Hypothetically, yes. Let's construct a scenario. Let's say you're a high-powered executive. You are under immense pressure. You hate your job. You're burning out. You are angry at your family, and you are on the verge of a total nervous breakdown, or maybe even snapping and engaging in violence, or quitting in a rage that just destroys your financial future.
Okay, sounds like a very, very bad Tuesday.
Right. But that explosion, that total collapse, or that act of aggression, that would be a massive destructive action. It would shatter your life structure. It would be, well, irreparable.
So the inner self sees this coming. It sees the energy building up toward that cliff.
Exactly. It sees the momentum, and it says, we cannot let the car go off the cliff. So what does it do? It pulls the emergency brake.
It creates a diversion.
You get a blinding migraine. You get a sudden, debilitating stomach virus. You throw out your back so badly you can't walk.
And now I have to stay in bed. I can't go to the office. I can't yell at my boss. I can't ruin my life.
Exactly. The illness is an impeding action in the short term. It stops you from working. But it is constructive in the big picture because it saved you from the bigger disaster. It forced a reset.
That's wild. It's like a safety valve.
It is, Seth says. Even an action which appears blatantly as an impeding action may temporarily serve as a constructive one.
But there's a catch, isn't there? It's not just, hooray, I'm sick, I'm saved.
The catch is the timeline. And this is where people get stuck, Seth warns. When this destructive possibility has passed, however, an illness that is still maintained would therefore become a definite impeding action.
Okay, so let's go back to our executive. The danger has passed. Stressful project is over. Or he's calmed down. He didn't yell at his boss. But now he's still got the migraine. He's still got the stomach issue. And if you hold on to it, now it's just a blockage.
Precisely. The safety mechanism becomes the trap. The cast was necessary when the bone was broken, but if you leave that cast on for 5 years, your arm withers.
And this brings us to the real conflict then. Because who decides when the danger has passed? Who decides when to take the cast off?
And this is where the dynamic between the ego and the inner self becomes so crucial. And it's usually a war.
Well, usually I want my ego to decide.
Right.
I want to say, okay, I'm done being sick now. I have things to do.
But the ego doesn't have all the data. That's the problem. Seth explains that the ego focuses on the physical world. It puts on blinders so it can manipulate physical matter efficiently. It often cannot judge what is good for the whole personality.
He says, the ego simply cannot judge, as a rule, whether an action is a constructive or an impeding one for the personality as a whole. I mean, that's incredibly humbling. It basically says, you don't know what's good for you.
It is. Think of the ego as a field commander in a war. He's down in the trenches. He sees the terrain right in front of him. He thinks, we need to charge that hill. But the inner self is the general back at headquarters who can see the whole map. And the field commander doesn't know there's an ambush waiting behind that hill.
So the general, the inner self, sends an order. Do not attack, retreat, or in our case, get sick, stay in bed.
And the field commander, the ego, is furious. He's screaming into the radio, why are we retreating? This is cowardice. I need to be productive. I need to take that hill.
But if he took the hill, he'd be wiped out.
Exactly. The ego feels blocked. It feels frustrated. It feels like a victim. But the whole self is being preserved.
So how do we fix this communication gap? Because I don't want to be a puppet of my inner self constantly getting sick to save me from myself, but I also don't want to be a blind ego crashing into walls.
Seth says the goal is integration, a well-integrated personality. This is where the ego realizes it is just one part of the whole. It's not the dictator, it's the interface.
He says, it is possible for the ego to realize its position as but one part of the whole personality, while it still behaves in a directive manner toward physical manipulation.
That is the ideal state. The ego listens, it checks in. Hey, inner self, are we good to go on this? And when that communication is open, you don't need the drastic safety valves like illness as often, because the ego can adjust before it hits the crisis point.
If the field commander talks to the general can say, hey, don't attack that hill, go around the left flank instead. And then nobody has to get hurt.
Exactly. And that is the goal of studying this material, to open the radio lines.
This brings us to the mechanism of habits, because Seth talks about pathways. This is where the rubber meets the road for anyone trying to change their life.
Yes. This is the physics of the mind, Seth says. Once such a pathway has been constructed, we have what you may call an action pattern or habit.
So a habit isn't just a behavior we repeat. It's an actual literal structure.
It's a groove in the energy field where action flows. Think of it like a riverbed again. Water flows there because the channel exists. It's the path of least resistance. Now, let's say you have a bad habit, an impeding action. Maybe it's smoking, maybe it's negative self-talk, maybe it's chronic worry.
The usual suspects.
Right. And the usual advice from the world is just stop doing it. Just quit. Just say no.
Right. Willpower. Just clamp down on it.
And Seth says that is destined to fail because the action, the energy is still flowing. If you just build a dam across the river without giving the water somewhere else to go, the pressure builds up. Eventually, that dam will burst and the flood will be worse than the original flow.
So what do you do? If I can't just stop, how do I change?
You have to divert the channel. You have to dig a new path for the water, Seth says. Then the secondary or impeding channel will automatically be closed off, but all action must be withdrawn from it.
You have to replace the bad habit with a new constructive action to take that energy. You can't just leave a void.
And here is the haunting part. Seth says that even when you close off a channel, say you successfully quit that bad habit, the channel, ghost, remains.
The ghost channel, that sounds spooky.
It's a structural reality, he says. The channel may automatically disappear, but the action itself can never be withdrawn. And earlier he mentions, for as long as the channel remains, then the possibility remains that the impeding action will reoccur.
That explains relapse perfectly. I mean, you quit smoking for 10 years, the riverbed is dry, grass has grown over it, you think it's gone. But the depression in the earth is still there.
And if a flood comes, a massive stress event, a tragedy, the water will find that old path of least resistance instantly, because it's easier to flow into an old ditch than to dig a new one.
Unless, and this is the key, you have built the new channel deep enough and strong enough that it becomes the new path of least resistance.
Exactly. It's all about conscious construction of new expectation patterns. You have to dig that new trench deep.
I want to circle back to something Seth said about training ourselves. He mentions we can train ourselves to react to constructive suggestions.
Yes, you can indeed, to a large measure, train yourself to react to constructive rather than impeding suggestions.
This seems to imply we have a filter. We aren't just like open doors.
We do have a filter, but the filter needs to be programmed. And remember, suggestions come from two directions, from the outside world in and from the inside personality out.
Bi-directional suggestion. That's a cool concept. So I'm getting suggested at by the news, by my friends, by the weather, but I'm also suggesting things to myself constantly.
And the ego is usually the gatekeeper for the conscious suggestions. But Seth implies we need to let the inner self have the final veto. He says, in such instances, however, the inner self should be allowed to make the judgment ultimately.
How do you do that practically? Like, I'm standing in the grocery store, I'm looking at the donut versus the apple. How do I let my inner self decide?
It's about intuition. The ego analyzes, the donut is cheap, the donut is tasty, I want the sugar rush. The inner self feels, this food acts as a blockage. This does not serve the whole. It's that gut feeling, literally sometimes.
It's like the listening with the knee experiment again. It sounds silly, but maybe it's about trusting a sense that isn't intellectual.
Exactly. Rob trying to hear with his knee was an attempt to bypass the intellectual expectation of ears hear, knees do not. He was trying to open a new channel of perception. He was trying to let the inner self show him what the knee could do.
You know, speaking of opening new channels, Seth drops a huge teaser in this session. We were focused on illness and habits, but then he suddenly talks about the dream universe.
Oh, yes. This is such a significant moment for Seth scholars. It's like a Marvel movie post-credits scene.
He basically tells them, hey, I haven't even really started talking about dreams yet.
Which is funny, right? Because they are 163 sessions in. They've written thousands of pages. They've been at this for a year and a half. And Seth is like, oh, we have hardly begun.
He says, we will, however, discuss it in detail, and we will use dreams from your own notebooks as examples in this study.
He is laying the groundwork for future books. He explicitly says he wants to use their dream notebooks as data for a body of material. It proves that Seth had a syllabus. He wasn't just rambling every week. He was building a curriculum.
And he emphasizes that dreams are not just random firing of neurons. He calls it a dream universe.
Yes, a valid, structured reality that we just don't understand yet. He implies that when we sleep, we aren't hallucinating, we are traveling.
I just love that sense of scale. We are sitting here in our living rooms worrying about our ulcers and the weather, and meanwhile, we are citizens of a dream universe we barely even remember.
And notice the juxtaposition in this episode. The session starts with the physical intensity of the jazz mass solid sound waves beating against the body, and it ends with the promise of exploring the dream landscape, which is the most ethereal thing imaginable. It covers the full spectrum of reality.
So as we wrap up the content of the session, the storm outside has passed.
Literally. Roab notes that by the break at 10:07 p.m., the rain had stopped.
And the contrast between Rob and Jane is just hilarious. Rob writes, "I was uncomfortable, my writing hand moist and clammy." Gross.
It is very visceral. He's sweating.
And Jane was perfectly at ease, her skin quite dry and fresh.
She's channeling a high-energy personality in a humid room with no AC, and she's fresh as a daisy. Rob is just sitting there taking notes, and he's a puddle. It really shows the physical changes that can happen during a trance state. Her metabolism is operating differently. She is quite literally cool.
And Seth signs off in a surprisingly chill mood. He says, "I feel quite benign this evening and enjoy our solitude."
Benign, it's such a nice word. He's feeling benevolent, peaceful, despite the heat and the thunder and all the heavy topics.
So what does this all mean? If we have to boil this down for the listener who is maybe driving to work or folding laundry right now, we've talked about jazz, knees, rivers, and ulcers.
Yeah.
What is the nugget?
I think the core takeaway is it's about flow.
The river.
The river. You are an event in action. Your personality is a flow of energy. When you feel resistance, whether it's a bad habit, a negative thought, or an illness, don't just fight it with willpower.
Don't just build a dam.
Right. Stop and ask yourself, is this an impeding action, or is this a safety valve? Maybe that anxiety is saving you from a worse mistake. Maybe that illness is forcing you to rest because you wouldn't listen to the polite request from your own body.
And if it is a bad habit you want to change, remember you have to dig a new channel. You have to give that energy somewhere constructive to go.
Create a new expectation, not just a wish. An expectation, a solid projection of a new reality. Visualize the new channel so clearly that the water wants to go there.
And trust your inner knee.
Yes, trust your inner knee, or at least trust that your body and your inner self know a lot more than your conscious ego gives them credit for.
It's empowering, isn't it? It takes the victimhood out of illness and habit. It makes us the architects, or at least the civil engineers, of our own psyche.
It does require responsibility, though. If you accept that your illness might be a constructive choice you made on a deep level, you can't just complain about bad luck. You have to ask, why did I choose this? What am I protecting myself from?
That is the hard question, but it's also the most important one.
Indeed.
We want to remind you that this deep dive is based on the early sessions, Book 4, The Seth Material. It's published by the New Awareness Network.
And if this conversation sparks something in you, please do not stop here. We were just skimming the surface. You really need to read the source.
Go to sethcenter.com. That's SETHCENTER.com/the early sessions. Get the books. Read the raw transcripts. There is a magic in the original text, in Rob's notes, in Seth's syntax that we can't fully capture here.
Seth's voice is unique. It really does carry an energy of its own.
Before we go, I want to leave you with a thought. We talked about the illness paradox, this idea that a problem might be a solution in disguise.
Yes.
So here's my question for you, the listener. If your current bad habit, that thing you beat yourself up about every single day, or that nagging physical issue, if that was actually a hero in disguise, saving you from something worse, what was it saving you from?
Wow. That is a profound question to sit with.
Mull on that, maybe cut your bad habit some slack, and then grab a shovel and start digging a new channel. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
Until next time.
See you in the dream universe.